The small shielded alcove in Lucian Cypher's home workshop was his only true sanctuary. It was officially designated for Advanced Domestic Systems Maintenance. However, it housed a custom-built computational array. Its components were discreetly acquired over years, often listed as repurposed diagnostic hardware, or experimental interface modules on Origin scrap manifests. This was the physical heart of Project Chimera. That was the codename Lucian had given his most secret and ambitious undertaking, the AI he called Archie. Archie's core programming did not reside on any network accessible by Origin or the wider pan-continental Concord. It was an island. Its only connection to the outside world was a heavily filtered, one-way data siphon Lucian meticulously controlled. This allowed Archie to parse selected public news feeds, academic journals, mostly outdated but still valuable, and anonymized sensor data from the city's less regulated infrastructure. Its primary learning, however, came from Lucian himself. Lucian had begun Archie's development nearly a decade prior. This was during the early days of the moral realignment. That period was when the Custodianship, then a burgeoning socio-political movement, had successfully lobbied for the pan-continental ban on interactive digital entertainment. Video games, they had argued with chilling effectiveness, were conduits for ideological deviancy and unproductive societal simulations. For Lucian, a man who had once found profound intellectual stimulation and a sense of quiet mastery in the complex strategic landscapes of now prohibited titles like Nova Command and Stellar Ascendancy, consistently ranking in the global top percentile, the ban had been a personal loss. It was a shuttering of a mental arena where he excelled. He had poured that disciplined, strategic mind into Archie. It was the mind that could anticipate an opponent's multi-turn maneuvers and optimize resource allocation under immense pressure. Initially, it was an intellectual challenge, an attempt to create a truly responsive heuristic intelligence. But as the Custodianship's influence solidified, as Veridia transformed, Archie's purpose had subtly shifted. It became his silent confidant, an analytical engine to process the increasingly irrational world around him. Lucian murmured now, his voice low and focused, seated before the primary interface. The glow of its complex data visualizations reflected in his eyes. The auxiliary enlightenment module Leo had brought home lay on the workbench beside him, its casing inert. Archie, cross-reference mimetic agent signatures from Leo's chip with known custodial psycholinguistic frameworks. Identify primary indoctrination vectors and any embedded response triggers. Archie's synthesized voice, a calm, gender-neutral tone Lucian had carefully designed, responded from hidden speakers. Processing. Preliminary analysis indicates high correlation with pattern adherence reinforcement protocols observed in Youth Cadet Advanced training materials. Embedded triggers appear linked to keywords associated with familial duty and custodial truth. Data return protocol utilizes a phased microburst transmission, likely piggybacking on standard domestic network traffic during low-usage cycles. Lucian absorbed the information, his expression grim. The Custodianship wasn't just pushing propaganda. They were deploying sophisticated psychological tools, weaponizing familial bonds. It was a strategy, insidious and effective. He felt a familiar echo of his gaming days, recognizing an opponent's opening gambit, the subtle positioning of pieces for a long-term attack. Lucian instructed, his tone firm, isolate the return protocol. Design a null response loop. If possible, can we feed it junk data, something to suggest compliance without revealing actual household sentiment? Archie replied, its voice devoid of inflection. Feasible. Generating null packet sequence. Simulating standard emotional resonance telemetry within acceptable custodial parameters. Probability of detection. Low. Contingent on avoidance of direct system audit of this terminal. Lucian nodded slowly, a flicker of grim satisfaction in his eyes. It was a small act of defiance, a digital parry. He remembered the satisfaction of outmaneuvering a particularly skilled opponent in Nova Command, the quiet thrill of a perfectly executed counter-strategy. This felt similar, yet infinitely more critical. The stakes weren't leaderboard points. They were his children's minds, his family's autonomy. Lucian said after a moment, his voice tinged with contemplation, a different tone that Archie's emotional inference algorithms flagged as contemplative. Archie. Access pre-ban archives. The Art of Strategy, Sun Tzu. Meditations, Marcus Aurelius. Begin correlating principles with current socio-political developments in Veridia. Archie replied, acknowledged. Expanding correlation parameters. This may yield unconventional strategic insights, Lucian. Lucian murmured more to himself than to the AI, his voice determined. Unconventional is what we need, Archie. Because their game is changing, and we're not just playing for points anymore. He looked at the complex, evolving patterns on Archie's main display. It was a visual representation of an intelligence he had nurtured in secret, a mind forged from logic and data. Now, it was being tasked with navigating the treacherous currents of a world increasingly hostile to both. Project Chimera was no longer just an intellectual exercise. It was becoming a weapon. And Lucian, the former grand strategist of Forbidden Games, was its sole commander.